We have fed people that are sitting adjacent to the fence on the park. And what we're trying to tell them is that wildlife really cares for them. And this is a message from the wildlife. So we don't give them the food without giving them the message. I've got all sorts of lights flashing at me. Maybe next question, then I'm talking too long.
No, it's perfect, because one of the places that we spent time in two Zulu communities. One where a person who is a private conservationist wants to expand the land for elephant habitat. And the second where the community, the traditional medicinal healers, are actually not as concerned about wildlife conflict right now, because it's their trees, it's their medicinal plants that are being poached. And in each one of those conversations, the common denominator was, how do we offer an alternative to people who are grazing animals on their land or coming to take the plants for their own survival? And at the end of the day, it comes down to the basic human right of food. If we cannot if we cannot give people access to what is most fundamental to them, then how are they going to even begin to care about wildlife? So in that circumstance, wildlife actually becomes a threat, not something that can be perceived, as a project that we can bring together. And so in South Africa, we have the history of apartheid, which has been a barrier to the interaction between people, local communities, and understanding what conservation is and how it can actually benefit. And you have the question of being hungry, like everywhere else. So Rosario, would you like to unmute and ask your question? You don't have sound? Okay, Rosario from Argentina is saying she works with the Ministry of Agriculture in Argentina, saying it's an amazing testimony. I would love to know, how did you start and what were the first obstacles you encountered?
Hola, Rosario. Muchas gracias. I am very good in Spanish when I'm in a taxi going to the airport, and he cannot hablo English at all. So I wish I could give you more in Espanol, but I was on the same Zoom the other day, and they said, which is your favorite city? And I traveled the whole world. And I did say Buenos Aires because probably I meant it. Anyway, I miss going there now obviously with COVID. Your question is, how did I discover? You know, once you're working in a community, and you're doing work year in and year out, you're going to schools, you're doing 150,000 children each year, you're speaking to people that are telling you, remember the kids that we educate are a source of intelligence. Don't discount the fact that a child who is 10 or 15 years old does not know what's going on in the community. And they everything, you know, what are they called? Yeah, so they basically, that the teachers, the community, the intel, the police, it gives you all the information, and then based on that you go back to business plan to raise money, to show people what your deliverables are in your projects, so that you can affect change. More than that, just coming down to experience. That's how we found all the problems in the community.
And I think Rosario was also going more along the lines of your childhood, perhaps, because from what I know, that's where you actually started. English is not even your first language. You grew up speaking dialects. So tell us a bit about that, because I believe that that's where it actually started. What you saw happening around you, the land that you grew up in, the community that you were involved with, and how you actually transformed what you saw around you into, which was a space for agriculture, into a conservation opportunity. If you can share some of that part of your story, I think that would be intriguing.
Yeah, when I grew up, yes, English was not my first language. I spoke the African language, which is Xhosa, and it's the click language. So it is a very clicky, almost like the Bushman language. And they taught me all about life in abundance, the trees, the roots, how you live off the land without complications. And we all thought that it was never ending. There were birds and there were bees and there was animals and only when I got to adulthood I realized that it was running out, and the world was really changing. So it's been 3 or 4 decades of constant threat to our world, and I think the highlight of COVID, COVID's been bad. It really has been bad. But what it has really taught us is that we need to be gentle on the earth. We've all of a sudden just woken up. It could have been a bat. It could have been a pangolin. It could have been a little animal that caused the world to shut down and to all be masked up with masks and to all have to not fly around and the world and visit and mess up our ozone and not use paper bags and plastic and it was all caused by man and the greed and our being very hard on the. I don't know if I'm getting more questions.
You are. And so I'll ask Guy Harris. Welcome, Guy, to unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi. Thank you very much. I'm on a device that I'm not normally on, so I might be a little bit not always easy to do this. I know that the simple one is environmental education, but people who are not able to have a sustainable living are not necessarily going to be able to be keen to have that environmental education. What else can we do to help create a sustainable win-win co-living relationship between humans and nature? Thank you very much. I'll switch off and listen to the answer. Perfect. But appreciate it.
Thanks, Guy. Great to see you.
I think, Zana, you're going to answer that one, aren't you?
No, you are.
Thanks, Guy. Yeah, but basically it does, you've mentioned it, education. A lot of it is programs. Obviously there are a lot of government programs available, but many of them are getting abused. Tertiary education, and I think what comes to mind, Guy, is winning combinations. They can see we have some very good community lodges and community programs that are starting to work. There are some like Campfire in Zimbabwe, and Zimbabwe also had a very, very tough time, with their governance in politics. But we have some extremely successful community lodges that are showing people, that they can upskill themselves. and they can work in the hotel, and they can be trained and go to, even if it's not a university, they can have the practical room experience. Start as a porter, take the luggage to the room, you know, see what the client needs, serve him tea and coffee, and give him his meal and work in the bar. And then eventually these people can come through, and we see them starting to run lodges, you know. My job is to take these young people when they're 10 or 11 years old and see them becoming game rangers from poverty situations. And I took a whole group to Vietnam to see how the Vietnamese youth behaved. I brought several groups back from Vietnam to show them what happens in Africa. Those are the real life experiences. I'm not sure if I've been successful in answering Guy's question, but there are many other ways which I can't think of right now, Guy. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. And one of the ways, Guy, that we're actually looking at with Grant and is impact investment in the area of combining an agribusiness model in successful enterprise and community self-employment and feeding with tourism, which is what Grant referred to right now, an example of which is Amakala Lodge is, where you have a place that people from the local community can be working and contributing to and developing their own skills in an important sector that we'll be looking to rebuild beyond COVID. And applying that to conservation. So how does the community actually take ownership over its animals? And we've recognized that it really, my perspective from what I've seen is that it really cannot start to happen until we solve the problem of hungry bellies have no ears. And we have a question from Wakani. Wakani, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Sure, thank you, Zaina, and thank you so much, Grant. This is a real privilege to hear you talking. My question to you is, you've mentioned how you were brought up in South Africa, therefore I would imagine that your interaction with the indigenous communities that live around the conservation sites is quite deep, you know, it's extraordinary. You speak the language and that sort of thing. So how would you describe their willingness to share their information about the trees, the medicinal plants and that sort of thing? Because that knowledge is dying with them, and it obviously needs to be passed on to the next generations. But is there a willingness to do that in a way that is relevant to this century that we're in, so that it is widely shared, and that thus we can sort of break this stereotype of the medicine man and, you know, that sort of thing? So I guess, yeah, my question is, do you see a willingness from the local indigenous community to share their local knowledge with the rest of the public, especially as far as education is concerned? Thank you so much.
Wakanye, I love that. Oral traditions are something that we are losing, and I love your question. Oral traditions, wherever you are in the world, need to be documented. Yes, the written one is in universities and archives and online and that, but I think we undervalue the oral traditions, and people that I am dealing with, and Zaina and Gusta have seen one of my 87-year-old traditional storytellers who won the Wildlife Environment Conservation Man of the Year last year. He'd been in an aeroplane, but he'd never read or write or learned anything. But wow, what knowledge he has of animal interactions and trees, and what happened to our rhinos in the past, and what happened to elephants in the past, you know. And yeah, and we're getting back to the medicines, you know, the medicine man at our last interaction last week. Those people were around to tell the story of what is used for stomach and what is used for period pains and what is used for migraines, you know. Then the other thing is, of course, younger people want instant gratification. I don't know if I'm past now. Younger people want everything on a mobile device and on instant gratification, and they are not really prepared to go back to basics. And so, you know, I'm torn between oral traditions and what needs to be put onto a mobile device to get people to accept that we're moving into, you know, another generation of young people that possibly will be very good on a computer screen and with sci-fi, and not with, I mean, look how we've changed. We're not even meeting face to face anymore. We're all on a Zoom call, or we're on Facebook, you know, and we could be losing the way of dealing with people and looking people straight in the eye, and we're not even allowed to shake hands anymore. We have to fist bump everybody now. So I hope that answers your question, but certainly oral traditions, wow, powerful, absolutely powerful.
And right there, because Wakanyi is actually, among many things, an indigenous storyteller. And I think that one of the ways, and you can speak for yourself on this, one of the ways you might be asking this question is because you're looking at how you can be of support to tell those stories of indigenous communities. So that would be a really awesome collaboration, something much needed. As Wakanyi, you also look at how you transform the traditional storytelling to something that is done online. I'm sure you're already looking at that. And like I was saying, Wakanyi was our influencer at our past two wisdom conversations on indigenous knowledge. So this is very much tied into, we cannot separate the amazing wisdom that comes from our ancestors, and especially our African ancestors, that we are now, I believe, exporting more and more to the world, especially as the world looks to Africa for information, for opportunity, for guidance on how to interact with what for so many people is the motherland. We have and anybody else with questions, please type them on the chat, or be ready to unmute yourself. We have a question from Beatriz Pomier. I will read this for her because she asked it in Spanish. She does understand English, so when you reply, I'm sure she'll be able to interact. How does it work for people who are paid to hunt, and how can we balance hunting and not putting the system at risk? Because the people who live there also need money the people in the communities also need money to survive. So I think there are two questions there. There's the question about what's the balance between hunting and maintaining the equilibrium of the wildlife species, because in some places hunting is actually allowed, and it's called sustainable utilization, from what I've learned. And the second is, there are people who are being asked to hunt or to poach who need the money. So what happens there? Those are the two questions.
Yeah, okay. You know, you remember in the old days there was always hunting, but it was a sustainable use. It was a privilege of, let's say, the Zulu people or even some other African tribes. They never took more than they needed for a start. They only hunted in winter, or when the animals were not pregnant or with babies. And those are the people that were incredibly knowledgeable on wildlife matters, and they grew up knowing it. It was automatic. That comes out of our research all the time. And I must say now that hunting plays an enormous part in conservation. Not that I'm a hunter. I don't shoot anything, but I do believe that everything must have a value. If it has no value, there's really little point in conserving it. So, I would hate to shoot a rhino, but I do believe that if the animal is 35 years old and is destined to die, that money is probably better spent in conservation. Therefore, I will agree that it may get hunted, but I just don't want to be there on that day. So I do believe in hunting, and I think conservation is a science now. We have scientists that are much more clever than I am. We measure the grass, we measure the trees, we measure the hectares, we measure the rainfall, and then we count the animals. We count them by air, we count them on the ground. They get plugged into a computer, and it spits out the result. And those results should equate to corporate governance that give permits out in order to hunt animals that are in excess of what you are allowed to keep on a said area. That's what we do at Amakala. And that is why we have a successful game park, where there's a balance between what the animals need and what the land can produce, and what the people that are coming to view that can then enjoy. If we have busloads of people coming to enjoy it, it impinges on your experience and it doesn't become enjoyable. For example, if you go to certain sightings, let's say on the migration crossing the Mara, they don't control it sometimes. The world's best spectacle, sorry for the hooter, the world's best spectacle is marred by 50 or 60 vehicles all jostling for a position. I've had that experience in the Ngorongoro crater as well. It happens in Kruger National Park, where you have a lion kill and everybody is trying to get to see the lion. And it's not a lovely experience. And that is why it's more expensive to go to a private game park where you only see one vehicle or two vehicles maximum. So maybe I'm getting sidetracked by excitement for conservation. But getting back to hunting, hunting needs to be done. But indigenous people only used to take what they could, what they needed. And if everything is controlled through permissions, then there's no problem. And everybody should live in harmony. Thank you for the question.
Perfect. Beatrice is thanking you for your responses. And as we move to From Nairobi with Love, you have a question. I'll ask you to unmute. As you do that, I would like to acknowledge the presence of Arun Hicks, Beatrice, Carolina, Ola, Daniel Cuesta, Helen, thank you for being here from Nigeria, Linda, Lucy, Mabel, hi, Nicolette, great to have you here. Salil, thank you so much for being here. And Vishal, thank you all for participating in this conversation, for contributing your time and energy from your different parts of the world. So From Nairobi with Love.
Hello.
Hi. Oh, hi, Robert.
Hi.
Great to hear you.
Hi, thank you. My question is, I would like to know what drives him to do what he's doing right now? Like as in, when he wakes up in the morning, what drives him, what motivates him to do what he's doing? I really want to know that.
Okay. Grant, did you get the question?
I did. I get asked this question all the time, and look, you when you commit to and wild animals and to donors, you can't stop. You know, you basically owe the people your loyalty, and yeah, you have good days and you have bad days, and you win some and you lose some, and you have disappointments, you have highs and lows, you know. So you have to just keep going. You know, I learned in the Congo, I think it's written somewhere in my book, that every day you're still standing, you're actually winning. And, you know, you get knocked over by crime, you get knocked over by bribery. And I learned that in the Congo, that every day that you are still standing, there's civil war. And it's mindling, but it's so exciting to win little victories one at a time. You know? It can be convincing a kid that they want conservation, or getting, you know, 100,000 rand or dollars or whatever from a donor, or seeing Rhino step off a truck on a new habitat, or staring into the soft brown eyes of a silverback gorilla in the mountains of the moon in the DRC before you die.
Robert, as a young African and aspiring entrepreneur, I'm really keen to know what you heard from what Grant shared. What did you hear for yourself?
Okay, for me, I hope you're getting me clear. Okay, for me, it's like Grant is, in short, he is living his purpose. That's one thing that I'm learning, that what he's doing is not like there's no one who is pushing him or anything, but it's within his purpose. It's something that when he's doing the conservation of animals, brings him a sense of fulfillment. So I think it's part of his purpose. Yeah, that's what I've learned.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. And I know, Arun Hicks, you had shared a comment, and perhaps you have something to elaborate on the point that has just been brought up by Robert and responded to by Grant. You say you can only do your little part to save the world. Would you like to unmute and elaborate?
Hello, everyone. It's so nice to see you all.
Great to see you. Why was your video off this whole time?
I don't like cameras.
Well, you're lovely. It's great to have you here. Thank you.
I'm also in doing my little bit for conservation in Kenya. Mm-hmm. And it has its good parts and mostly its bad parts, where you're always frustrated and disappointed by one thing or another. But from what Grant said, I feel conservation is like being a doctor or a pastor, where it's a calling from God, where you commit to something and you can't leave it, as in it's what you do, and you do your best to see it through. We can't save the world, so I have a hashtag on my Instagram that says you just do your little part to save the world.
Thank you so much for unmuting and for opening up your video and for sharing with us. And we would love to know more, perhaps you know, on the chat or after the wisdom conversation, about what you're doing and how we can bring our efforts together. I mean, I have met people in South Africa who work with pangolins, and yes, their life is dedicated to that. And you can only be crazy to want to spend your time monitoring a pangolin. Yeah. I have met, again, through Grant, you know, a lady whose whole life has been, who started off as a ranger or a guide, and now she's monitoring elephants full time. And yes, that passion can only come if you're crazy enough about your belief in this. And I think that's how I believe the world needs people who are obsessed with what they're doing and what they care about in order to make that difference. earlier this week, we met a guy called Nunu, who couldn't make it on this call, who is a rhino whisperer. And he walks everywhere in the world barefoot, including airports, including on the road. He doesn't wear shoes. He is so connected to the earth and so connected to his experience of being alive that, I mean, of course, when you look at him, you think you're mad, because we have been taught to wear shoes, that shoes are the right thing to do, but our ancestors went everywhere barefoot. So I think there's so much, I haven't found the thing I'm crazy enough about to be up 24 hours, doing in terms of conservation, But what I do believe my personal contribution could be is with, the respect for nature, understanding the plight, and then seeing where I can contribute. And this is exactly what the wisdom conversations are about. It's about understanding wisdom from people who are living this, and then generating an impact together. So your stories are so important. Thank you so much for sharing. And Helen, would you like to unmute and just share the comment that you had put on the chat? Helen had said, I have added to my knowledge of the environment and wildlife. And I think as soon as she's able to unmute, if she is, we'll give her the chance to say something. So coming up to 2 minutes to close. Grant, would you like to share a few parting words? Some wisdom that you have specifically for our guest today. And thank you, Alex Caubet, for joining us. Oh, maybe in response to Rosario's question, which is, what can we learn from rhinos?
I'm not sure if that's Alex Miller that's joined us, because is it her? Ah, hola. Okay.
Yes, it's me. I don't know if I can stay the whole meeting because I've got another meeting and this is in between two meetings, but I'm here. I'll mute and I'm here.
No,
Thanks for being here.
I tell you, if there's one Argentinian that I really love and respect, it's Alex. I know I'm probably, at least she's listening to me, but she is an ambassador for South Africa and Argentina, because she brings many people to this country. And she's also been part of the same experience that Gusto and Zaina have been to a school to educate children. And she actually even taught them how to say hello, hola, the Zulu kids. And I think she mentioned the other day, it was one of the most inspiring days of her life,
It was. It's true.
Was it really?
Yeah.
I loved it. It was amazing.
Yeah, there's nobody more knowledgeable. I'm a beginner and I've been in it for 20 years. Alex was the former owner of Grosvenor Tours, which her husband, Carlos, started in South Africa. So when Argentinians all left, they never knew about a safari. And Carlos taught them all about safaris. And from there, the whole business has gone Central Africa, really all started with Grosvenor Tours. Sometimes they don't call it Grosvenor, they call it Grosvenor Tours. So
yes, I remember, Grant, I also had another DMC, Planning Southern Africa. Maybe you don't remember because you didn't come and visit. It was your cousin that used to come, a lady from Amakala, a very nice lady. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex, for joining us. We're actually just finishing up. So Grant, perhaps you want to answer or leave your last bit of wisdom in response to Rosario's question. What can we learn from rhinos?
I think what you can learn from rhinos is they are very, very, some of them are very gentle animals. They are gentle on the earth. They fight back when you attack them. When you're in their space, when you irritate them. But they'll actually, live their own life and not interfere with us humans. We are their only threat. They do not have other predators. A lion does not even eat a rhino, maybe a baby, but humans are the only threat. They've been on this planet for 58 million years. That's what we can learn from them. We have evolved recently. They evolved many, many years before we did, as humans and as mammals. Their horn is not medicine. So, fake news. They actually going to, they're endangered because of, and isn't that sad? We all read stuff on Donald Trump and whoever else, that's all bloody fake news. And I don't know what else I can say about wisdom, because I'm like all of you, and I happen to write a book which has become a bestseller, and hopefully somebody in takes it to Spanish language. It's only in English at the moment, but I would love to come to Latin America one day and do some marketing and proposals and book launches with the book. What is it, Alex? El Libre del Rinoceronte.
El Libro del Rinoceronte. We actually had, remember, I did a special book for kids, which is a digital form, which we can also, maybe we should do that and share it with other people in other countries. What we did is we took stories that had rhino from all the African legends, and we translated to Spanish, and we created a book, and so that children all over the Spanish-speaking countries can read about African legends, learn about rhino, and then at the end of the book, we talked about what rhinos are suffering and why it's so important to keep them in mind, pray for them, and do whatever we can to stop the killing of rhino. So all that is in a small book, that we created with Grant a few years ago, which every now and then I send the link to schools and people.
Yeah, I'm sorry she only came out at the end, because she could have done my speech all in Espanol.
Yeah. Well, that's, I think that's amazing. And we also, Alex, thank you so much, because that's the kind of innovation that we need. First, you're symbol of history. And so thank you for being part of this conversation. And let me also acknowledge the presence of Laura Terán, another fascinating woman, Argentine, that we work with to bring people to Africa. And I think just within this community, we have the opportunity to be more conscious about how and who we are bringing can be contributing to conservation and protection of our endangered species. So a lot of knowledge within just this conversation alone that we can start to look at, because these conversations are, yes, about sharing wisdom, yes, about generating impact. And that's something that we can truly engage people from across the global south in together, especially as we look at how are we going to play our part in tourism, in the tourism sector moving forward. How are we going to play our part in preserving what our ancestors have, or as the saying goes, what we have borrowed from our ancestors. At some point, what we borrow, we must give back. Perhaps we've taken too much. And how are
It froze. Are you there, Grant? Are people there? Because it froze.
I'm back.
I also lost. It must have been an African thing. I don't know what happened.
No worries. Sorry, I just want to say that the author.
I think that's a sign.
No,
that's a sign to end.
Listen, the author of the book, you know that the series, I think it's Nick Reeves or Greaves. I can't remember now because I'm not at home and I'm very bad with names. But he allowed us to use any story related to rhinos. I've got it in writing. We can translate his stories, all these legends that he put into the books, like how the zebra got its stripes, you know, those books, you know, the series, Grant. We are allowed to use those series and translate to any language we want. All the, not the series, but the stories about rhino, he gave me the right to translate not only to Spanish, but to other languages. I can contact him again if you want to use them for kiddies' books or whatever.
So my connection proved unstable for a little bit. Sounds like I missed out on a good part of the conversation, but good to come into it while it was still going. Thank you for keeping it alive. I think the final part of what I wanted to say was how can we all do our part to keep our communities, this as a community and our extended communities engaged in this conversation. I want to thank you all for dedicating your energy and your time and your wisdom and knowledge to this conversation. Thank you for your presence from various parts of the world, across various time zones. We are united through the conversations that we can have together across cultures. And this is the point of our wisdom conversations. Thank you, Grant, for sharing your wisdom with us today, for bringing to the forefront what was a new conversation for many of us attending. Thank you to everyone who has shared through asking questions or just in terms of acquiring new.
Zaina is lost.
We lost her again. Anyway, I got Ale here.
Yeah, we lost her, sorry. Yeah, sorry I barged in. I don't know how many people are watching and I'm talking, but anyway, I think it's for a good cause, so.
No, I think, sorry, man, Zaina is in Sinkwasi and it's not a great signal there. She's actually in Kingsley's now. So
Adios.
You're back.
Thank you, Grant.
Yeah, so we're saying we can, I'll ask everyone to unmute and say goodbye in the language of their choice as we leave the room.
Bueno, hasta la próxima.
All right, thank you.
Hasta la próxima.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.
So much.
Bye. Bye. Thank you. Oh, so.